Welcome to MSNBC special coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. I'm Velshi. We got a full slate of experts standing by to break down all the day's developments. But first, here are where things stand right now. At least 281 people are dead across the United States. 23,000 are infected. More than 80 million Americans are being told to stay home. Today, New Jersey became the latest state to issue a stay-at-home order to its residents, following similar directives in California, Illinois, and here where I am in New York. As medical professionals across the country continue to voice concerns over a lack of life-saving supplies, President Trump continues to try to shift the blame.
Given that this is one of the wealthiest, most powerful countries in the world, should this even be happening? Shouldn't this have been resolved weeks ago?
I'll tell you the way I look at it. So many administrations preceded me. For the most part, they did very little in terms of what you're talking about. This is unprecedented. You could speak to Tony, you could speak to anybody. This is unprecedented or just about unprecedented. As time goes by, we're seeing it's really at a level that nobody would have believed, nobody would have thought possible that this could happen. And we are making much of this stuff now, and much of it's being delivered now. We've also gotten tremendous reviews from a lot of people that can't believe how fast it's coming.
Who are the reviews? Who are these tremendous reviews coming from? What should the federal government be doing? And what are they doing to help protect the men and women who protect this country? To answer that, I'm joined by Dr. Vin Gupta, a pulmonologist who just finished a night shift in Seattle in the ICU, helping care for patients with COVID-19. And Vin, I think I might have seen you on the other side of the shift. You and I were talking last night. He's a professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Sarah Samir, she and I were talking earlier. She's an Air Force veteran who's been trying for weeks now to get a test for COVID-19 after exhibiting a number of symptoms. And Dr. David Shulkin, who has been with us regularly, he is the former Secretary of Veteran Affairs under President Trump. Thanks for joining us, the three of you. Sarah, I just want to start with you because we had an audio problem earlier and we couldn't get your full story. You are a military veteran. You fall under the care of the Veterans Administration. You have been trying to get a test since the beginning of the month. What's your situation? How are you feeling? And what has happened to you since trying to get a test?
Hi, Allie. I started feeling sick in the beginning of the month. It came on kind of slow, and then all of a sudden kind of hit me pretty hard. I had a lot of chest problems, fever, my throat was hurting a lot. And then I realized I couldn't really do much other than lay on my couch for a few days. After probably 8 to 10 days, I decided to call the VA and was told not to come there, that if I were to come in to talk to my doctor, that they wouldn't let me through the gate because of the symptoms I had. And I was trying hard to see if I could just see my doctor to see if maybe I had the flu or something else going on, even not even necessarily thinking it was that. But they wouldn't even let me see my doctor for that. They wouldn't give me a flu test. They wouldn't give me a test for COVID. And after calling back several times, I have about 2 hours logged of back and forth with the VA here in West Palm. They wouldn't let me come in. Every single time I'd call, they'd call me back to make sure. They told me over and over again, do not come here. And then randomly overnighted me amoxicillin and an inhaler in the mail without seeing me, without diagnosing me for anything. And after calling back the next weekend, found out my doctor was on vacation for 2 weeks. And they told me if I feel worse in a few days to call back again. And by this time, most of my symptoms had started to clear on their own. I ended up going at the advice of a telehealth person a few days ago to the emergency room for respiratory issues that are lingering. All of my other symptoms have pretty much gone by now, but I still have a lot of pressure in my chest and hurts when I breathe still. And they basically told me, doesn't matter what my symptoms were, you can't get a test unless you're over 65 years old, have been to China, or have been in contact with someone who was lucky enough to actually get a test. So,
Dr. Gupta, this is an area of your specialty. So there are several things here that I just want to unpack. First of all, Donald Trump said to Yamiche Alcindor at PBS yesterday, you and I discussed this last night, he does not know of anybody in America who needs a test who can't get a test. So let's just put that aside for a second. What should Sarah be doing?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm sorry, Sarah, that was your journey. That should be no patient's journey in the United States for any condition. certainly for COVID and all the fear around it. So I'm sorry that happened. What I would say, Ali, is clearly testing is aspirational at this point for the entire country. We know that people who need it don't have access to it. I will say that I think hope is on the horizon here, and we're going to have relief coming up very shortly in terms of drive-through testing being scaled, home send-in swab infrastructure being put into place in major cities across the country. So there is going to be relief, Sarah and Ali, very soon around the corner. What I would say directly to Sarah about what do you do now? Well, your story is the story I've heard from many of my patients and family members seeking reassurance, really wanting to know, are they posing a threat potentially to the health of loved ones? And that's really challenging. Almost the psychological toll outweighs the physical toll of the virus in some cases. And so I'm glad you're feeling better. I think at this point, continuing to do what you're doing, which is televisits, trying to engage in a way that doesn't require an in-person visit, makes the most sense. And I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Secretary Shulkin, you are a medical doctor as well, and not only did you run the VA, but you ran a major hospital group across the river in New Jersey. So a couple things. You and I have spoken several times over the last few weeks about the one good thing is that the VA has capacity to be able to do this. So the idea that Sarah couldn't get the necessary testing through the VA, what do you make of that?
Well, it's really painful when you hear stories like Sarah, and I couldn't agree more that thankfully, Sarah, you seem to be doing well and you have been seen, and that's what's most important. Our veterans deserve the very best care that this country can give, and this clearly was not an example of that. I know the men and women who work in the VA, and they are some of the best healthcare professionals in the world, but as a physician, I agree with Dr. Gupta, this was not good care. People should not have to, especially our veterans, have to go through this type of red tape to be seen, to get tested. And frankly, we can do a lot better than this, and Sarah deserved better than this. Fortunately, I hope that she didn't take the antibiotics that were given to her because she wasn't seen and evaluated, and chances are this wasn't a bacteria. But hopefully she's on the path to getting better now, and we certainly want to see better than that in the future.
This is a little tricky, Dr. Gupta, because the president has again tweeted today. It's the second time now he said this in a row, and Dr. Anthony Fauci has contradicted it. He's discussing a set of treatments that involve a malaria treatment and an antibiotic. And there are a lot of people saying an antibiotic, this is basic medicine stuff that people like me don't necessarily know, but an antibiotic treats a bacterial infection. Coronavirus is a virus, does not react to antibiotics.
And so what's being posed, thanks, Ali, for the question. What's being thrown around really on social media is studies that have very, very small studies out of France and China that suggest an old anti-malarial drug, chloroquine, and a less potent version, a derivative called hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil, often used to treat lupus and other inflammatory disease states, that those drugs are showing some degree of effectiveness in limiting what the virus does in the body. That sounds vague because it is. We have no evidence that there's therapeutic effectiveness. In other words, that it's actually saving people's lives or it's keeping them out of the hospital for a longer period of time or getting them discharged in a shorter period of time. We have no evidence. You need randomized control trials for that. And so Dr. Fauci is advocating, let's put the brakes on this, let's get some studies done, let's talk about this through evidence, and maybe there is something to all this potential promise that's coming out of France and China here, but let's put the brakes on. So that's why he's saying that, and he's 100% correct.
Ali, if I could just jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, because you had asked about the second drug, which is called azithromycin. It is an antibiotic. This comes out of a study that was recently published out of France. Dr. Gupta's right. It was a case study of 20 patients, so that certainly isn't large enough. But this particular antibiotic is an antibiotic that also treats what we call atypicals, which potentially could be helpful when additive to the Plaquenil. But I completely agree with what Dr. Gupta and Dr. Fauci has been advocating, which is this is just too early for us to know, but that combination is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, but for those Americans who are getting their medical advice from Donald Trump's Twitter feed, it says go for it. So this is the concern I have. Secretary Shulkin, I do want to ask you, when you ran you ran a hospital group. Earlier on the show, I had General Russell Honore on, and he's the second person who in 24 hours has said to me, we need to get a whole bunch of people who have basic training or are in the middle of their training as doctors and nurses out into the field immediately. Hospitals are suffering from a staff shortage, not just from people who may have infection and who need to protect themselves, but of all the other people that help medical facilities run who are not there. And there's a call to get doctors in training out into the field, to get nurses in training out into the field. Tell me about how you think about this from a staffing perspective of our healthcare system, which is now we're starting to get up to the top of the capacity of it.
Yeah, I think that as we begin to see the demand on our hospitals, clearly the shortage that is going to be most concerning are the staff shortages. When you look at experiences in past pandemics, up to 35 to 40% of staff will not be able to come to work because they themselves may be ill or they're caring for family members at home. And so dealing and preparing for the staff shortage is critical. When I first came to the VA to take over the healthcare system, we were facing an incredible demand on our facilities. We couldn't care for all the veterans who needed to be helped. And one of the first things that I did was I granted our nurses, our advanced practice nurses, the independent ability to practice. And that really helped free up our demand. And that, I think, is something that should be looked at again, because we're going to need all the help that we can get should the worst of these scenarios become a reality.
Sarah, where are you in your situation right now? Are you free of symptoms?
Excuse me. All of my symptoms have dissipated. The only thing that's remaining is I have a lot of chest discomfort and I get winded really easy. But again, when I went to the ER the other day, I tried to ask them, when did they start testing? Because the doctor came in and handed me a piece of paper that had the qualifications for what you need to do or be before they'll give you a test. And he said they've been doing it for weeks. They've done it since it started. And I told him, I called on the 11th and was told that you weren't able to do testing. And he said, oh, well, we hadn't yet ordered the test at that point. But that was just a week ago. So I'm not really sure what exactly that means. I have another friend who works at the VA who's a veteran who is sick with symptoms. And he was told that they're probably not going to get tests till next week. So you don't really know who to believe when they're saying anyone who needs a test can get a test. But at the ER, they're saying we've been doing it for weeks, but we haven't ordered them. I'm pretty sure that the only way to stop the spread of this is to know who has it. And you can't know who has it if you're not even testing severely symptomatic people. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. That's Vin Gupta. When we talk about, we've been dropping, Singapore and Hong Kong and Japan and South Korea and how they managed to flatten the curve and in some cases really put a lid on this thing. And it was the idea that people who are suffering from particular symptoms, particularly respiratory symptoms and other things that look like a flu, did get tested so they could get a more complete picture of what's going on. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're an economist or a doctor or what you are in this society. I think we all share the view that we need the most full information we can get, and that we have not been working on the basis of that full information. We're now 2 weeks out from the president having said, I don't want those people getting off that ship because it'll double our numbers. We're now above 23,000 people infected in the United States. It sounds to me, and again, I'm not a doctor, but it sounds to me that Sarah falls into the category of people who should be tested.
Sarah absolutely falls into that category, Ali. I couldn't agree more. And in spirit, Sarah, I'm there with you. You deserved an early test, and the system failed you, and I'm sorry for that. What I will say is, unlike South Korea, unlike Singapore and Japan, the countries that you cited, Ali, we're well past that point. They were effective at containment with early testing. And yes, in that case, you want to test people that are symptomatic, quarantine them, and try to minimize transmission. Here, we are under a situation where we need to move towards a national lockdown. We are well past that point. Some states, 20% of the U.S. population is effectively shelter in place. What's the 80% What are the other 80% doing? We're recommending that they stay sheltered in place. This lack of unanimity in policy at the federal level is causing a lot of confusion. Some people think they have their freedom to do as they please, others don't. The end result here is that we're going to have a crisis when it comes to continued transmission because we're pursuing a middle-of-the-road approach. With middle-of-the-road approaches, You're going to get middle-of-the-road outcomes.
Thank you to the three of you for joining me. Dr. Vin Gupta, I appreciate the time you keep taking. You're either treating patients or you're with us. He's a pulmonologist and a professor at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Sarah, thank you for joining me again. Sarah Samir is an Air Force veteran who is having remarkable difficulty getting tested despite displaying symptoms that would suggest that she should. Dr. David Shulkin is the former Secretary of Veteran Affairs under President Trump and ran a major hospital system. Thank you to the three of you.